On my left side is my neighbor to the east, and I have this stand on the right side here. From the gate up at the cabin, it's 3 miles over the road system down to this point. And the neighbor, I worked out access with him, allowed him to come in and access his land, because he has to drive across the Silver Creek to get to his land from the south. And it's not practical to do that with any logging trucks in the wintertime when it freezes, and even if it doesn't, they don't like to get their brakes wet driving across the water. So being a good neighbor, and I want to encourage people to manage their land for timber and wildlife, I have given access rights to them, both on the east and west side, plus to a cabin that a former logger has off my southwest corner down there.
Chuck's road network has provided access into this property. Chuck's road network is very extensive, and it serves Chuck's needs over time. Once it got to the neighbor's property, it was a much smaller and quaint road system just to meet the needs of getting one harvest done for this landowner. This was a rather large harvest. The neighbor brought out about 2,000 cords of wood across this property, the 3 miles through Chuck's land, which equates to about 200 truckloads of semi-loads of pulpwood. And that's a lot of traffic on Chuck's road that he granted to be a good neighbor and to help accomplish the goals of sustainable forestry and meeting those tree farm pillars of wildlife, recreation, forestry.
Got to meet my 2 neighbors basically because of our hunting interests. The neighbor to the east, I met him at a woodland owners conference in Milwaukee down there, and then he came out and looked at the land, and we had several harvests together with that neighbor, myself, and then this neighbor here, primarily because all 3 of us didn't have enough acres to harvest to interest someone coming up here to do it. This neighbor, I met the fellow that has the cabin off to my southwest corner down there, was a logger from the area here, and he owned this land at one time, and he had sold it and then introduced me to the person that bought it. And they bought it for hunting, and were kind of reluctant to do any harvest or anything initially, because they said, well, I don't know anything about that. You know, I said, well, come on over and take a look. And he did, looked at the road system on there, and I think he was a little apprehensive about, you know, cutting the timber and the roads. So I have a few smaller roads here that were put in too, and I showed him those, and I said, well, you don't have to go and build them as wide as I do. But and by looking at that, and I invited him over to a couple of field days I had on my land here, and he realized that there's going to be a benefit to the harvest in there for the wildlife and the deer. And he did have this harvest in 2018, and they still have a little work to do in there yet. But he also now has entered into the MFL program also.
Chuck's scenario about working with his neighbors is kind of a rarity this day and age. Most neighbors don't get along or don't want to know their neighbors. So what's very interesting about what Chuck's done is he's found that common interest across the borders and gave them a good exposure to what he's done in the past, and they liked what they saw, and they've seen a higher or a greater picture of what their properties could lend to the whole area on more of a landscape level versus a small parcel level. they share common goals and interest. And when you start managing your timber, it can just really extend, and you can reach those goals much easier across the bordering lines with your neighbors.